grow, and I hope grow too.
Yes, very interesting temperament, and one that again can be very easily misunderstood. I want to try and give the feel of the phlegmatic here. We kind of talked about the melancholic as being like that circle that's alive all the time. But at the heart of the phlegmatic is this big question, am I substantial? Is there anything to me? It's quite difficult to find the right phrase to express this, but it's a kind of fear that there is nothing substantial to you. You're not solid enough. And if the wind blew strongly enough, you'd kind of get blown away. And by that, I mean emotionally. And that's a really important thing to hold on to as we go through all these attributes, because that drives so many of these characteristics. So, for example, the first thing we're going to say about them is that they can so readily be self-protective. But that makes sense, doesn't it? If you think of the fact that they feel unsubstantial, they're going to protect what they have got and not risk it being taken away from them. So relationships it's a dilemma, a paradox really. The phlegmatic, like any other human being, longs for meaningful relationships, but what they will tend to do is, as somebody approaches them, even to give love, there will always be that feeling of either they're not good enough, or this person, they may not think this, but this person is going to demand something of me, and I'm not sure if I can deliver. They've come to take from me. And the whole thing is sort of tipped in that direction. So they'll protect, they'll keep you out. And that can be really difficult. And this is where the understanding of the relationship between an extrovert and an introvert is very important. So let's put one of the extrovert temperaments that we'll come to in a while on top of that phlegmatic. So let's say we've got a sanguine phlegmatic. We'll see that a sanguine has just got a lovely personality. But inside, although the sanguine is reaching out, the phlegmatic is self-protecting and withdrawing. So with this person, you could feel, yeah, I can have a great relationship with them. They're lovely and enthusiastic, but the truth be known, we can't get near to them at depth. And that would be your reason. The phlegmatic would be protecting themselves because that's their instinctive stance, really.
Just on that, John, when you say the phlegmatic is, protecting and, you can't get to that depth, can you give a practical example of that?
Well, as we touched on yesterday, in marriage relationships or even in friendships, it doesn't all have to apply to marriage. You perhaps see it at its starkest in marriage. You'll get perhaps the lovely sanguine melancholic wife, as we used the illustration yesterday, who will have married this lovely, calm and collected man, and maybe he's got enough choleric that enables him to relate at a level to his wife, but she really wants his heart. She wants a deeper connection, and when she goes looking for it and asks for it, it feels like it's not there, but it actually is.
Do you mean share the phlegmatic not sharing their deeper thoughts and feelings on things?
Yes, and not able to pick up the melancholic's thoughts and feelings. You can hear the words. There's a million miles, isn't there, between hearing a statement from somebody and actually picking up the feel of what they're saying. It's somebody said to me once in a given situation, and she was tearful at the time, but she looked at me and she said, "You get it, don't you?" And that's what we're all looking for, somebody who gets it. It doesn't have to be in a lot of words. You just know that you've connected with the inner part of that person. And that's where it can go wrong, when there's the extrovert that is kind of acting as a substitute for what the phlegmatic should be doing. But anybody who's trying to draw close to that person will know that something big is missing here, and they're being denied what they entered into that relationship for.
And is there how would they self-protect? Would it be,
This is a very good question. Control is the key word. There's just certain places they won't go to, and they will justify, they will defend, they will duck and weave. They'll give you all the right answers. You'll get a good logical explanation of a situation, but there's no heart in it. They're often good people. Some of them aren't very good. They can be horribly controlling. They can be, if we take this to an extreme, the kind of person who's very well thought of amongst the people out there, perhaps in the community or amongst a bunch of friends. And everybody says to the wife, "Oh, isn't he lovely? And you must be so pleased to have a man like that." And little do they know he's, control freak at home, and she's really under pressure. And there's just the ability to control when they don't want somebody to get close. That's the point. You can afford to let Mrs. Jones down the road get close as up to a certain point, because she won't demand anything of you emotionally. Why have a nasty habit of expecting something of you emotionally? So that becomes a threat. And so it's about control. Just another thing that's worth throwing in here, that self-protective instinct that we spoke about right at the beginning of the phlegmatic, it leads to taking the line of least resistance. So confrontation, anything really difficult emotionally, anything demands anything of the phlegmatic emotionally, he will feel or she will feel that to be a threat. And so you just protect. You just don't go there. What's the point of getting tangled up in that? It's the classic of where perhaps let's create a family situation here, and a daughter who's struggling with some issues phones in, or it might be a son even phones in. Dad picks up the phone. The son starts to pour out his trouble, and there's a good chance the phlegmatic dad will turn to the wife and say, "There's a call for you, dear," and begs his wife to step in. Because he's not chosen, perhaps during even his developmental years, and maybe he wasn't encouraged to. So now, as an adult, all that stuff is beyond him, because he hasn't chosen to engage.
Yes, and actually, as a melancholic, I find that concept a little bit hard, because I kind of feel like I can always and quickly be emotionally engaged.
Yes.
So for someone to have, this, I guess, on-off switch, choosing what they're engaged with.
Yes.
It feels like a little bit of a, out there concept to me.
Yes. Again, sorry, there's an important point in there in what you were saying. Just as the melancholic is that ever alive circle, so the phlegmatic is also like a circle, but their circle is divided up into segments. And we can think of them as almost like at the edge of the circle, they have shutters. So you could have, let's say there's 30 shutters, 29 of them could be closed down. And if there's an area of life that they choose to engage with, they'll be wonderful and they'll pursue it. And there might not have been money to go on holiday that year, but if he suddenly gets it into his head he needs a new camera or a new computer or something like that, suddenly this money magically appears. It's because that's taken his interest. So he can, as an individual switch for each of the segments, he'll choose what he gets involved with. And there's also a master switch right at the center. Whereas if he wants to completely close down, he can. I keep saying he, but you know that I include she in all of this, because you can get phlegmatic ladies.
So then I guess it comes down to that person, being aware of that side of themselves and then actually choosing to engage, even if they don't feel like it, or if they want to switch off.
That's it. Love should cause us to go against those automatic, well-rehearsed instincts, so that we choose to put the other person first, and we reach through that barrier, and life becomes completely different. If it's about us in our little world, it's a miserable place to be. Make it about the other person. I almost see it like a seesaw. I'm sure we have all done this as children. I remember playing in a park, and sometimes somebody else would be on the other end of the seesaw, and I'd stand up on one end, and especially if they were lighter than me, and then I'd start to walk towards the center, and you'd reach that certain point where the other person would go down at the other end of the seesaw. And point of that illustration is, it's when what the other person feels matters more to me than what I feel, that then things start to happen for the good. And it breaks that self-protective shield that we put around ourselves.
Yes. So let's chat a little bit more about the other negatives, and then go into some of the positives with the phlegmatic.
Okay, they can be, because they feel unsubstantial, and I'll move through some of these quite quickly, they can feel very anxious. That can turn into to developing a kind of checklist mentality that compensates for this general feeling of anxiety. They're trying to tie things down. They can be indecisive, and the reason for that is that we need that emotional side of who we are, the emotional life. We need our introvert to engage emotionally, whether it's with a person or a situation, so that we get the feel of that situation and can make a decision. So somebody might come to you and say, could you please help me with some advice here? Now, if we can get emotionally involved with that situation, get the feel of it, the phlegmatic is capable of giving good advice. But if they don't engage, it's just a mental level response, and it's often not worth very much, to be honest. So another trait is spectator. Because of everything that we've said about being self-protective, they become an observer. They look on. They'll be great at sitting in front of a television. A lot of good children, inverted commas there, because they're quiet, they're not often the noisy one in the family, easy for mum or dad to plonk them in front of the telly, because they'll watch Thomas the Tank Engine 28 times all the way through, and because they're observing. It doesn't require anything of them, but doesn't do them any good. They will procrastinate. Again, it's that theme of the line of least resistance. So, why put yourself through the emotional challenge of having to do something today if it could possibly be done tomorrow? And there's always the chance that tomorrow may never come, or it might not need doing by tomorrow. So let's take that chance and not bother with it today. They can be fearful. A lot of the phobias, and I certainly can't say all, but you will often find the phlegmatic experiencing many of the phobias that trouble people. It isn't that the melancholic doesn't have their own version of fear, but that feeling of being unsubstantial can really create a pressure within the phlegmatic. They have their version of being selfish, and it links in with the self-protection. So they'll protect what they've got, and they can be mean with what they've got. Now, if they like you, or if they believe in your cause, in fairness to them, they can also be very generous. But it's what they select. So it can often be quite minimalistic. And that's part of the self-protection. they can be very lazy. And I do say can be because we're also going to see in a moment they can be very hardworking. It's what they choose to be. This line of least resistance again. Why bother to tidy your room today? It's not too bad. It's live-inable. And then when it gets really, really bad, then you have a big splurge and tidy it up. And then you determine you're not going to let it get like that again, but you do. Until it gets really bad again. Instead of choosing to engage all the time, consistently, and to be on top of things. And that links in with being unmotivated. Again, why bother? Now, if a phlegmatic does have a conviction, and by that I mean if there's something they really believe in, and they really latch on to that, they can be very good. And as we'll see in a moment, they can make very good leaders. And they're very motivated and very solid people. But if they choose not to engage, then you won't get the best out of them. And that's, before we move to the positives, that's a key thing. That a phlegmatic can be one thing or the other, chalk or cheese. It's down to their decision. They could grow up as adults loving books, absorbing them, or never reading a book from one end to the other, and for their adult life. It depends what they choose to do, and it lies within their power. They can be dull and grey, or they can be colourful and positive. They've got the power of choice. I know we all have, but that's particularly applicable for the phlegmatic.
So shall we go on to some positives for the phlegmatic?
I think we'd better. that dislike of conflict and confrontation, if used properly, can serve them well. So the first quality that we can talk about here is their ability to be diplomatic. They can see things from both sides, and if they're using their tenderness, now we haven't talked much about that, and it's worth putting that in here, just as a melancholic has that sensitivity